I was up 6-0.
Well, obviously, we all want to honor my dad and all the ways he reached people. And so my brothers and I thought that one of the best ways to do that would be to bring in one of his favorite bands, Iron Butterfly, and have him play Inagata-Davida on the organ. But they heard on the news the funeral was last week, so you guys missed that. So I'm just going to have to wing it, and you'll have to settle for me. They mentioned earlier that it really was kind of a miracle that my dad lived as many years as he did, because he had open heart surgery as a kid. But what they didn't say is that he was actually the first paid open heart surgery in the entire state of Iowa. So if his parents hadn't taken him to Des Moines, or if he had been born at any other point in history, he wouldn't have lived this full life. So it really was a miracle. You guys probably, a lot of you know him from Honor Flight or Marriage Encounter or even Scouts or whatever. But for me and my brothers, the things that we've been talking about a lot is all the scouting memories we have. He took us camping every single month, and what he would do with his vacation days is in the summer he would take a week off and take us all to scout camp, and then he'd take weeks off to go on high adventures for the older kids. And that was kind of the big thing in Scouts, is you worked toward being 13 years old so you could go on the high adventures, because those were the bigger trips. And so my dad would leave me at home, and Rob and Tom would go sailing in Florida for a week or canoeing in Missouri for a week. And so I finally turned 13, and usually the high adventure is a little bit after you're 13, you're usually a little bit older. But for me, it was right after I turned 13, and he's like, all right, we're going to go in February, and we're going to go up to the Boundary Waters in northern Minnesota, and we're going to build little snow huts and cross-country ski across frozen lakes. And that first time we went there, every other crew that went back to home base and gave up. We were the only crew that stayed out because the wind chill was actually 30 below. But my dad wasn't the kind of guy to do something just a little bit. Everything he did was 100%. On the way back to base camp on the last day, you're cross-country skiing, you're pulling a sled with all your gear. We brought tents. Some people slept in snow huts. I had to sleep in a tent with my dad because we didn't make enough snow huts. The people in the snow huts were nice and warm all night. Us, the tent poles snapped because the wind was so cold. So I was 13 and complaining, and we had to cross-country ski through a blizzard to get back to the base camp. And my dad took my sled and attached it to the back of his and cross-country skied pulling both sleds. And that's just, to me, that's something that just really indicates the kind of life he lived. He really was happiest when he was serving others. He was all about helping people. When he got sick with FTD, a lot of times people can, their inhibitions go away and they can become angry and isolate themselves, and he never did that. His authentic self was being that generous, happy person. So his life started with this miracle, but really the last 4 years, it's ended with a miracle. The fact that he was able to stay home and be with my mom is something that you guys cannot imagine how many sacrifices she made to make that happen. And it's not that they just stayed home the last 4 years. They packed an entire retirement into 4 years. They've been to 41 states since he got diagnosed 4 years ago. I can't count how many times she's been to Disney World, probably about 1 million, and just countless national parks. And they went on adventures together. That's what they did. It's easy to think, man, his life was cut so short by this. It's really a shame. But that's not the way my dad would look at it. He would want us to focus on the positive side and appreciate the years that we had with him and not think about the years that we're not going to have with him. At the end of every Boy Scout trip, we would do something called Roses and Thorns because he wanted us to appreciate and be thankful the fun trips we were having. And so everybody would go around the room, and they'd say a rose, something that they really enjoyed from the trip. But my dad was always about self-improvement and trying to be better the next day than you are today. And so you'd do a thorn too, not to focus on the negative, but just to acknowledge that, hey, there are things that, maybe somebody didn't have a good time with something, and we can improve on that for the future. It's really amazing that Bryce Chapman spoke up here. If you guys had met Bryce in 5th grade, you would never have dreamt in a million years that he would do this. And it just means the world to our family, and it meant so much to my dad. Like Bryce told you about kids being afraid of heights, public speaking, it wasn't just hundreds of kids. He didn't just spend years at our troop. He started a venture crew. He did 3 crews after I went off to college, and so he didn't even have any kids in it. And he was going around to other troops and packs and training the adults how to be leaders. And Rob and Tom were both COPE directors and with my dad, and they would get people to jump off 100-foot cliffs with rappel lines, of course. But I mean, you can't imagine that moment you lean back. That moment you lean back is the scariest thing in the world. And he would get all these people to do it. At the National Jamboree, he literally helped thousands of people do this. And I think the way that he did that was just by becoming their friend. He was genuinely your friend, and he just was there, and he believed in you. So to be honest, I really wasn't sure if I should talk because I get super anxious. Like, I quit taking drum lessons because the drum solos made me super anxious. I quit debate in high school because I had my first panic attack. But it's because my dad, being my friend and believing me, that I'm able to be here. And so I just want to end with a quote from one of his favorite characters, or 2 of his favorite characters, because it's Spock if you watched the movies a few decades ago. It's Kirk if you watched them recently. But you are and forever will be my friend. So with that, I want to bring up 2 of his close friends, Bob and Denise Welter. They were there. My dad stayed in their house on one of our high adventures when I finally got to go sailing down in the Bahamas. We stayed at their house on the way down. So I want to bring them up so they can talk about my dad.
Before I sit down, I would just like everybody to take a moment to recognize my mom for all the work she did the last few years.